What's up, guys? Rick from DFS On Demand here, coming to you from Las Vegas. Can you see that? Oh, wrong way. Got the wind in the background. Obviously, outside the studio this week, if the quality or the sound is a little poor, I apologize. We'll get back to it next week. But this is the preview for the Houston Open, formerly the Shell Houston Open, but I guess it's just going to be the Houston Open this time. Should be a lot of fun coming off the match play last week, which was an awesome event. I really appreciate all the support for the guys who are following me. I had 150 lineups in that $5 on DraftKings. We had a pretty good sweat going until the Elite Eight. And then Bubba, who has apparently switched bodies with someone, like some Freaky Friday type thing, where he's now switched bodies with like Tiger Woods or Phil Mickelson or like Dustin Johnson or who knows. Apparently he's going to win every single week. But we're going to turn towards the Houston Open this week. Let's not waste any more time. Let's get after it. All right, so let's take a peek at the cheat sheet. If you've never followed this video series before, all of these tools are available on dfsondemand.com. I've made them myself, and this is what I use on a week-to-week basis. So let's talk about this week. It's kind of interesting. I feel like it's somewhat top-heavy for players trying to round into shape before the Masters, but then there's going to be a lot of guys who don't play, so it's like super top-heavy, and then kind of falls off a cliff and gets kind of crappy after that. The biggest example of that is Luke List is your 5th most expensive golfer. That's literally falling off a cliff. So let's talk about the guys above him, and then we'll talk about the rest of them. So Justin Rose, no surprise to see him as the most expensive player on the slate. We've talked about him a lot. He's literally one of the hottest players on tour over the last year. I'll show you that on another tab here, but just keep him in mind. I mean, you know, a 15th place last year here. I'm going to call it the Shell Houston Open like over and over again. The Houston Open. So obviously, you know, a decent course history, you know, nothing spectacular, but he's literally one of the hottest players on the tour. Jordan Spieth, you'd just be buying what we would deem low for Jordan Spieth, right? Like, he wins his first 2 matches at the match play last week, runs into Patrick Reed. You know about the putting woes all season long. Back in Texas, like, you're essentially buying low on Spieth at 11,100. I think there's probably better options. Speaking of which are the next 2 guys. So Stenson we talked about, I think, at the Valspar, where it was his first tourney back. He's played a lot on the Euro Tour to start off the calendar year. A 2nd place finisher. I feel like Stenson always goes overlooked. I don't know if it's just because there's always better players in the field or more popular players in the field, but Stenson seems to always go overlooked. 12-1 to win this thing. A 4th place the last time he teed it up. He's finished 2nd place here in the past. I mean, Stenson's a guy who's probably going to get a lot of my GPP shares. If I'm playing a lot of cash games, which I usually don't, Phil Mickelson is going to be the guy, right? So he won in Mexico, was banging down the door in previous weeks before that. His course history is actually better than the last 4 years. He's won this in the past. Here it is. 2011 is when he won it. So when we get to the course history tab, you're going to see how well his course history relates, or his tournament history relates here. Better than what you're seeing in the last 4, and he's literally in a. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. He was in the best like 2 and 3 week stretch of his career. He's literally in the best 4 tournament stretch of his career right now. If you're just going by finishing position, right? Which I don't know what else we'd go by, but literally in the best of it right now. All right. Here's where it falls off. So what are we going to do in this next range? Because I think this is going to be the most important. Luke List at $9,600. I guess I get it because someone has to be $9,600. So it's not like the DraftKings pricing is ever going to have huge gaps in it, right? They're going to take the Vegas odds and they're going to take the best odds to win and make them the most expensive and then keep going down the list. So there's really no huge gaps. So Phil Mickelson 12-1 at 10,200 is pretty significantly better than Luke List at 25-1, and he's only $600 cheaper. Luke List should not be $9,600 basically in any week ever, but DraftKings has to fill in the pricing. So it's like these guys right here I think are a little bit overpriced. Luke List is. Berger, who's at least had decent success here with back-to-back 5th place finishes, but hasn't shown much since, didn't make it out of his group in where were they? At the match play event in Austin. So, it's hard to invest in a lot of these guys that are really just filler because the DraftKings pricing has to be this way. I kind of like to skip this 9,600 to 9,000. I might skip that whole thing and really, really like Charles Howell here. So 2 top 7 finishes in the last 3 years. He had a 4th place at the Arnold Palmer, and then he won his group last week. So this is going to be really interesting, right? So for guys who played last week, we're going to be saying, did they play well enough to give us something to be excited about, but did they not make it so far that they're now fatigued? And I'm not sure we have any of those in the field who really made it so far that we're worried about it. Like, we don't have Bubba in the field, obviously. Like, we don't have anybody in the finals. But nice to see Charles Howell make it out of his group, and it was a pretty tough group. So I really like Charles Howell here at 8,900. As we continue to roll down here, there's going to be a few other guys I think that pop out at me. I think it's always a little risky to grab a young guy who basically wins for the first time and try to take him the next week. That is usually a recipe for disaster. It's very hard for those guys to back it up again. Our friend Chesson Hadley, who has fallen off a cliff since the start of the swing season, he's going to pop up a lot in our key stats when we get to that portion later, so keep him in mind. I'm not overly thrilled, but again, this field falls off completely. Like, we're going to have to roster some guys down here. The other guy who I think is priced very incorrectly is going to be Chez Reavie. Go back and watch any video we've ever had here. We talk about Reavie a lot. He had those back-to-back second places at the Waste Management and the Pebble Beach, and then he's had a bad run of it. It's been a couple weeks since he's played. He flashed a high finish here in the past. When we get to the key stats, he's going to pop up all over the place. If Luke List is 90-something hundred and Chez Reavie's 7,300, that's a big problem. So he'll be getting a lot of my dollars. Grayson Murray's interesting from a GPP standpoint just because he's not consistent at all, but he can pop off for these high finishes. And what you're going to see is he makes a lot of birdies, and birdie or better is a very important stat for this week. Sean O'Hare has now backed up a couple of good finishes in a row, and he has a top 10 here in the past. I don't think he's the worst option, 80 to 1. You can see he's the same price as Sam Saunders, who's 150 to 1. KJ Choi, who's 200 to 1. Meaning his price might be a little off. There might be a little value there. If you rely on course history, and we'll go to course history here in just a second, Chris Stroud has shown it. 3 top 25s in the last 4 years. We can probably move over to that course history tab here, and I'll just kind of show you what's going on. So Russ Henley's going to be your ultimate chalk, right? Not only was he last year's winner, but he's got 4 straight top 7 finishes. He absolutely just jumps off the chart here. Here's Phil. Okay, so I was on the cheat sheet. I only showed you the last 4 years, but if you look at this, he had a really great, basically 6-year stretch where he won the tournament and never finished worse than 17th. And now you're getting him in, again, the best 6-week time frame of his career. Here's Stenson that, if you go back a little further than the cheat sheet shows, he had a 2nd place and a 3rd place and then a 2nd place 2 years ago. So it's been a little bit feast or famine. I don't think he's a great cash game play, but you can certainly get involved in some GPPs with him. Here's Charles Howell. Here's the full course, the full tournament history. So he's got, 3 top 10s in the last 5 years. He tacked on another top 20 in 2011. So he's going to be a staple in quite a few of my lineups here. Okay. Let's flip over to the tour stats sheet so I can show you a couple things. Here's what I was talking about from the start of last swing season. So basically the 2017 PGA Tour season, which started in October 2016, Justin Rose has played 15 PGA Tour events. He is by far the leader in DraftKings points, average DraftKings points. He's averaging 86 of them. Phil Mickelson, 76. Jordan Spieth, 76. Fowler's up there. That's significant. Let's see what happens if we do... Yeah, even if we remove who's in this field, Justin Rose is still number one. So remember that year Justin Thomas had? Remember that year DJ had last year? Remember that year John Rahm had last year? We've all just been like oozing over these guys, right? Justin Rose has still scored more fantasy points per start in that time frame. Okay? If we look at just this field, he's kind of blowing away the competition. Phil's on here as well. And if we turn this into more recently, like if we just look at since the start of like this calendar year, Justin Rose still on there. Phil Mickelson, James Hahn actually pops up, believe it or not, and then here's Chez Reavie, right? So it's only been 4 starts. I think one of his second place finishes is in there, or maybe both of them. I guess both of them are in there. But you can see, like compared to this field here, which gets very weak, like Reavie should not be $7,300. Okay. And let's flip over my correlation chart here. So if you're new to this, what I do is I run a regression model for the last 8 years of PGA Tour stats and the last 8 years of each tournament to see which PGA stats correlate for each tournament. This week, it's the same course that's been used since like 2006. So we've got 8 years worth of course history for my stats. And the stats that were most important were par 4 scoring, birdie or better, which are usually normal ones, especially for DraftKings scoring. And then total driving has never popped up before. Quite honestly, it's not a stat, excuse me, it's not a stat I particularly like, but this is the first time that it's ever popped up in the, 10, 15 weeks we've been doing this. So I felt it was worth including on here. And then greens in regulation, that's not another one that pops up too often. So I was actually kind of surprised by that. So we do have some different key stats to use this week. For the record, I have to change the color scheme on this greens in regulation. The better numbers are higher numbers. They should be green instead of red. So keep that in mind. So let's run through these. Par 4 scoring, you're going to see something pretty interesting. And it doesn't always come out like this. All 4 guys, I think there's only 4 guys over 10,000. Or Stenson might be 2. But I don't know if we have enough stats for Stenson to qualify. Let me check this real quick. No. Okay. So Stenson doesn't have enough tournament rounds on the PGA Tour to qualify for stats yet, which is why he's not on here. So really all 4 guys who qualify over 10,000 are 1 through 4 in par 4 scoring. That's pretty significant. What does that mean in terms of creating lineups? I think it means you need one of these guys, right? I think you can use them for different formats. I think Mickelson's a better cash game play. Spieth, I'd probably really only touch in GPPs. Rose, I'd probably be okay with both of them. But really, I don't think we've ever seen that where the top 4 most expensive players lead the way in one of these key stats, even if it is a stat like par 4 scoring or strokes gained total or anything like that. And then this is what I love. So after that, it's Chez Reavie, who is $4,000 cheaper than some of these guys. Like, okay, I'm now convincing myself I will have so much Howell and so much Reavie, it's going to be sickening. I might lock them into every single lineup. A couple other guys that might be interesting here. Piercy is a guy that we've talked about in the past. Like, we thought he was rounding into form a little bit. He makes enough birdies to get by. I don't mind him all that much. Peter Uihlein at least showed a little bit of something in the match play. Ran out to a big lead against Rory. Didn't end up winning his group, which was a little disappointing, but he does score well on par 4s, but not much of anything else. Streelman's actually on here a couple times, right? So par 4 scoring, and then shows up pretty well in total driving and greens in regulation. So Streelman might be a guy you'd want. Here's your birdie or betters, and I mentioned Chesson Hadley was going to pop up. No surprise to see a couple other of these guys. Grayson Murray we see quite a bit. I'll start to convince myself on James Hahn, who every time we show this, we talked about DraftKings points per round. We're talking about birdie or better. Here's James Hahn. And it's a really weak field. Like, someone is going to have to top 5 this. that's not one of these top 4 guys, right? Like, even if you slot them all into 1 through 4, someone else is going to have to top 5 this. Someone else is going to have to top 10 this. Like, it's going to fall off a cliff. I would be okay investing my money in James Hahn, in Chez Reavie, in Charles Howell. Finau at 9,000, at least much better than his peers. So would you rather have Tony Finau or Luke List? Like, that's not even remotely close. The answer is Tony Finau. Total driving, the lower the better here, because it's a combination of accuracy and distance. Again, I don't love this stat, but it did pop up, so it's worth talking about. Streelman's in here. Then it's a lot of outliers. Sean O'Hare. Ian Poulter, who obviously played awesome last week at the match play, really trying to get into the Masters, right? He was finished one round short of qualifying last week, so he's really trying to get in, so there's at least some motivation there. Reavie's at least another top 20 play. It's pretty unbelievable. All right, and then here's your green and regulation. Streelman's your leader. Fowler's on here. Reavie. Emiliano Grillo popped up here a couple times. Keegan is here for the last 2, total driving and greens and regulation. There's Finau again. So, I mean, be smart about this. Luke List might go out and win this thing. I highly doubt it. I think it's a bad investment to take him over guys like Kuchar or Finau if we ran this tournament 1,000 times, right? Like, I just think it's a bad investment. And then we'll go back here to the cheat sheet and we'll just do the odds and we'll see if there's any real value plays or anybody who sticks out. Let's see here. Lovemark at 50-1 is the first real one that pops off, right? Like, the scoring's pretty straight up. The pricing's pretty straight up based on the odds. Finau's a little bit like Finau and Luke List are both 25-1 to win this thing. Finau's $600 cheaper. This is the first one that really pops off, I guess, is Lovemark at 50-1. So is Grillo. So are a lot of guys in this range. He's $7,300. That's pretty good. Reavie again in that 60-1 range. He's $7 cheaper than Snedeker. He's $900 cheaper than Bud Cauley. Like, nothing against Bud Cauley, but Reavie's a much better golfer. Russell Knox is on here, 60-1 at 7,300. That's kind of interesting because it's not like he has any great course history. Has he really never played this before? A top 15 finish a couple weeks ago at the Valspar. He's popped off for a couple of top 10s this year. He's, according to this, would be underpriced. That might be it. The rest is pretty good. So there's a couple of values there. So there you go. Let me know what you're going to do after those top 4 or 5 guys. Let me know where I should go in Vegas for the next couple days. Any hot spots, tweet me. It's at DFS On Demand, or leave a comment below. Talk to you guys soon. Later.